My name is Omar Al-Hassan. I'm 32 years old and was born in Raqqa, right in the heart of Syria. For as long as I can remember, that city has never known peace. The streets, which might once have been filled with laughter and running children, were, in my childhood, only silence, smoke, and destruction. The sound that rocked my days wasn't birdsong, but bombs falling, gunshots piercing the dawn, and screams of despair echoing from somewhere nearby. I grew up watching buildings crumble like sandcastles, feeling the ground tremble beneath my feet. Little by little, fear stopped being an unexpected visitor and became an old, almost banal acquaintance. It was in this landscape of ruins and uncertainty that I learned what the world was. To me, from an early age, it seemed to be made only of pain, struggle, and survival. And within this chaos, the figure who most influenced me was my father. He was a man of unshakable faith, but a faith that I only understood much later as distorted. For him, serving God wasn't just praying or helping others. True service, the purest and most honorable, lay in armed combat, in what he called jihad. I was still a child when he began to teach me that this was life's greatest calling, its most sacred mission, and I believed every word. The way his eyes shone with conviction made it seem as if heaven only opened to those who fought and died for this cause. In our house, his words were law, and questioning them was like defying God's own will. Raqqa wasn't just where we lived, it was a battlefield. Every corner bore the scars of war, every wall hid stories of bloodshed. I grew up watching armed men parade through the streets as if they were heroes, and little by little, without realizing it, I shaped my identity around war. I learned to believe that living and dying for a divine cause was the only true way to exist. My father spoke of paradise with such certainty that it seemed he had already walked there. He described rivers of milk and honey, eternal gardens where there was no pain, only pleasure and rest. He said that the martyr was received with unimaginable honors, and that the first drop of blood shed washed away all sins. He also spoke of rewards, complete forgiveness, heavenly brides, the chance to intercede for 70 relatives. Every word sounded sweet, but today I know they were poison in disguise. Those speeches were seeds planted deep in my heart, seeds that germinated silently, transforming my faith into a weapon. At that time, I didn't know there was another way. I was never taught to question, only to obey. And so, from an early age, I began to become what he wanted, someone willing to live and die for war. From a very young age, I embraced that worldview as if it were the only one possible. Live for God, die for God, even kill in his name. The walls of my house were covered with portraits of martyrs, men my father claimed had achieved the highest honor, and each black flag waving among the city's ruins seemed to me a symbol of glory, of unshakable faith. The so-called holy war wasn't a distant concept. It was part of our daily lives. I grew up hearing that those who joined that fight received blessings no outsider could even imagine. And wanting to please my father, wanting to find a purpose, I ended up joining the Islamic State. I vividly remember the day I pledged allegiance to the cause. In that moment, I felt like I was finally fulfilling the destiny I had been born for. My heart was pounding. Adrenaline was pumping through my body. I was young, full of energy, and I truly believed I'd been chosen by Allah. In my early training, every drop of sweat that ran down my face felt like a kind of divine seal, as if it were God's approval. We learned how to fight, how to plan attacks, how to take lives, and each instruction was always accompanied by verses from the Quran. Faith and violence were presented as if they were inseparable, and the scariest thing is that for a while, it all made sense to me. I believed we were executing God's will. Every shot, every death, was treated as an act of worship. We were told that the blood of infidels was a sacred offering, that to destroy meant to purify, that we were cleansing the world. But there was something deeper, something I only realized over time. The group's ideology was like an invisible chain. tightening ever tighter without our realizing it. It was a doctrine designed to stifle any doubt, any sign of humanity. Killing ceased to be a burden and became a virtue. Empathy, regret, fear, all were seen as weakness. The deeper I immersed myself in that universe, the more I lost myself. The line between right and wrong began to blur. Fanaticism masqueraded as devotion, and I, already so involved, would only realize later how much I was being deceived, manipulated, and the price I would still have to pay for it all. Our interpretation of Islam was like a heavy, hard rock, sharp as a blade. There was no room for doubt, for compassion, for humanity. With this hardened view, I received my first mission after training. I was filled with fervor. I felt for the first time that I belonged to something greater, that my life had meaning beyond my own existence. I no longer saw myself merely as a soldier. I believed I was an instrument of God's will. Our destination was a small village south of Raqqa. The leaders told us that traitors to the faith lived there, people who dared to practice Islam in a corrupted way. The order was simple: purify. Eliminate any trace that didn't align with our beliefs. Destroy everything that was different, and all who resisted. The attack happened at dawn. The sky was still deep blue, dotted with a few stars, as if the entire universe were watching in silence. We stormed the houses in a line, shouting verses from the Quran, and soon chaos ensued. Screams, running, desperation. I'll never forget the dry sound of gunshots, the doors being broken down, the smell of gunpowder mixed with dust, and the desperate cries of people. I saw men trying to protect their families, women clutching their children, and children running aimlessly. My hand shook at first, but I pulled the trigger. Again and again, without distinction. We weren't there to understand, only to eliminate. At that moment, I believed I was doing the right thing, that each life taken was like a sacred offering, another step toward paradise. But when the last scream died away and the village fell into a deathly silence, something inside me stirred. That silence didn't feel like victory. It was heavy, suffocating, as if even the world had stopped to breathe. I walked among the bodies, slipping in the blood, avoiding looking directly at their faces. But eyes were everywhere. Most were still open, fixed on some point, as if asking, why? In that death camp, something settled inside me. It wasn't regret, not yet. It was like a stone in my stomach, a discomfort I tried to silence by repeating the verses I'd been taught. I told myself it was necessary. It was for the cause. In the days that followed, I did what I always did. I buried my doubts, stifled any feelings with justifications. I convinced myself it was right, that the world needed to be purified. But the faces of the victims, especially the children, wouldn't leave me alone. They began to haunt me. I saw them reflected in the water, in my dreams, even in the faces of the living. Looks of fear, open mouths begging for mercy. And even in the silence, I could still hear the screams. It was on another mission, a few weeks later, that this rift within me finally opened. We had been sent to an even smaller village, almost forgotten among the mountains. The orders were the same: no survivors. As we entered, I saw a woman kneeling, holding her small son to her chest. She was trembling, but her eyes were fixed on mine. In that moment, everything stopped. I saw fear, pure and raw, but I also saw something else: humanity. And for the first time, I hesitated. That second seemed to last an eternity until the commander's voice cut through the air behind me, harsh, demanding that I do my duty. I fired. The gunshot rang out louder than usual. The woman fell, still hugging her son, and in that moment, everything inside me shattered. I could no longer believe, I could no longer pretend. This wasn't justice, it wasn't religion, it was murder, it was pure evil. I stood there, covered in blood, listening to the echo of the shot fade into the mountains. The silence that followed brought neither pride nor a sense of accomplishment. It crushed me. From that moment on, something began to crumble inside me. I began to wonder if I truly knew Allah. Did God want this? Did he rejoice in blood, in the despair of mothers, in the terror in the eyes of children? The questions came like an avalanche, and for the first time I let them overwhelm me. I was no longer sure of anything. Was I serving God, or was I serving evil? Over time, I no longer knew if I was serving God, or just feeding a machine of violence that used his name as a disguise. On the outside, I still obeyed, still wore the uniform, still marched in the ranks. But on the inside, I was broken. I carried with me the weight of every life I'd taken. And worst of all, I believed there was no going back, that I had been shaped by war, made of pain, forged in blood. I no longer recognized myself. I looked at my own hands, always stained red, and wondered, how did I get here? The face I saw in the mirror was no longer mine. It was that of someone cold, empty, hardened. And yet I continued that life. Not because I wanted to, but because I saw no way out. Violence was the only language I knew. Pain was the only shelter I knew. Until one day, in the middle of another mission, everything changed. And it changed in a way I could never have imagined. It was considered a simple operation, but in a high-risk area. For me, it was just another one. There was no longer any fear, just that automatic cold, as if I were a machine. But then it happened. The explosion. A mortar shell landed so close I didn't have time to think. I only saw a white light, heard a deafening buzz, and then silence. My body was thrown violently. I felt my bones shatter, my skin tear. Blood was gushing out before I even realized where I was wounded. I hit the ground hard, and in that instant I knew I was dying. The pain was unbearable, but with it came a strange calm, as if finally everything was about to end. The world around me began to spin, my vision blurred. The sky seemed to darken too quickly, and as the life drained from me, I felt something in the air, an icy presence that touched my soul. My heart slowed. Death didn't come as a sudden cut. It came as a slow plunge into something deep and dark. I heard whispers that I couldn't quite place, maybe from my mind, maybe from somewhere else. But I felt it. I was leaving my own body. I was crossing a border. Suddenly, everything around me disappeared. The smoke, the gunshots, the screams. Only darkness remained. But it wasn't ordinary darkness. It was dense, suffocating, as if I'd been submerged in a bottomless, airless sea. I couldn't feel my body anymore. What I felt was even worse. Fear. A fear that grew inside me like poison. And along with it came other things. Guilt, regret, despair. Everything I had buried over the years came rushing back, like a hurricane ravaging my soul. The first thing that struck me about that place was the sound. Screams. Deep, desperate cries, as if all the pain in the world had been gathered there. I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was as if invisible chains held me captive. The air was thick, hot, and each breath felt like it burned my lungs. And that's when I realized I wasn't unconscious. This wasn't a dream, this was real. I was in hell. Not the symbolic hell of religious parables. It was real. There, the words I had heard since childhood took shape before my eyes. The fire burned, but did not consume. People screamed but did not die. It was like a prison of the soul, where the pain never ended and hope simply did not exist. I saw figures contorted in agony, faces disfigured by suffering, wide eyes trapped in endless cycles. Some screamed, others merely moaned, as if they no longer had the strength to fight. The despair was palpable. The pain was raw. It was as if those souls were being ripped apart inside and out. And yet, they remained alive, eternally alive, eternally burning. And then I began to see familiar faces. First, old comrades, jihadists who had died with me, men who believed they were fulfilling Allah's will. But soon other faces appeared, much harder to face. They were the victims, people I had killed myself, innocent people, children, women, men who just wanted to live. They were there, looking at me. Some screamed, others just stared at me silently, as if their souls were asking me, why? I tried to speak, to ask for forgiveness, to cry out for help, but I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come out. My throat was dry, as if made of ash. I tried to run, but there was no ground. I tried to escape, but there was no way out. The truth wrapped around me like a blade spinning inside me. This was the price. This was the fate of the life I had led. The paradise I had been promised was in fact a trap. What awaited me was a place of torment, forged by lies, and the flames surrounded me. The most frightening thing about that place wasn't just the endless screams, but the silence between them. A heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to swallow me whole. And amidst that abyss of pain and remorse, one question wouldn't leave my mind. Was there still salvation for me? Could God hear me even there, where time seemed to be non-existent? I don't know how long I remained in that state. It could have been minutes or centuries. Everything there was distorted. But I remember the moment I returned to my body. It was bloody, broken, but alive. I don't know if that was a vision of death, a divine warning, or just a small taste of what awaited me. I only know one thing. I came back different. After seeing hell with my own eyes, I could never fool myself again. The screams, oh, those screams, continued to echo within me. Each voice seemed to tear at my skin and my soul at the same time. It wasn't just fire. The true torment was memory. It was guilt. It was the memories of the lives I'd taken, the eyes I'd seen fade, the cries for help I'd ignored. All of it surrounded me like living echoes crying out for justice. My chest felt like it would implode. I could barely breathe. It was as if each death had become a stone on top of me, crushing me little by little. And I wondered, would this be my eternal fate? To be devoured by guilt, by fire, by this endless despair. It was then that, deep in that darkness, I saw something. At first, just a point of light, almost invisible. But little by little that flame grew. Unlike the fire around me, it didn't destroy. On the contrary, it transmitted warmth that comforted, not consumed. At that moment, I knew that light wasn't coming from there. It wasn't part of that place. The light approached, and with it I felt a presence. It wasn't like those distorted shadows of hell. It was something pure. Within the brightness stood a tall, majestic figure, radiating something my mind couldn't explain. For the first time in so many years, I felt peace. Real peace. Even in that tormented scene, it seemed the chaos fell silent before him. The closer he came, the more the weight on me seemed to lift. The pain receded. The darkness within me trembled before his light. When the voice came, it wasn't a shout nor an accusation. It was a whisper, firm and yet soft, and it called my name. Yusuf. I froze. How did he know my name? How could someone like that exist in that place, where only condemnation existed? But the answer was in his eyes filled with compassion. There was no hatred, no judgment, only sadness and love. He looked at me as if he already knew everything, every step, every mistake, every wound. And yet, he remained there. You were deceived, he said. They used my name to justify violence. They used faith to spread death. You believed them. You fought for a lie, and you lost. In that instant, my legs buckled. I fell to my knees, burning with shame. His words cut through every excuse I'd made throughout my life. It was the truth. I'd been deceived, and the result was staring me in the face. But then he said something that changed everything. You are not yet beyond forgiveness. Those words hit me like a wave. I looked up, my mind lost. How could someone like me be saved? How could he speak to me with such love after all I'd done? And he continued, I saw every tear. I saw every time your heart wavered. I know what you did, but I also know why you did it. Yusuf, I died for you. Hearing this was like breathing after a long time underwater. He reached out his hand. When his touch met mine, I felt a rush of warmth. It wasn't a burning fire. It was a healing fire. "If you turn to me, I will forgive you," he said. "Your sins are many, but my love is greater." At that moment, something sprouted inside me. Small, fragile, but real. A seed of hope. In that moment of timid but real hope, I heard him say, "I showed you the way, Yusuf, but the choice is yours." My legs trembled, because I understood that redemption wasn't a prize someone received at the end of a fight. It was an invitation I never imagined receiving. And now it was before me, waiting for my answer. When Jesus spoke about forgiveness, it was as if something inside me finally broke, but not in pain. It broke in liberation. My soul, which had been chained by guilt for so long, opened like a flower that after years of weathering storms, finally feels the warmth of the sun. It wasn't just relief, it was a rebirth. I felt forgiveness like a river of clean water washing over every part of me. Not just the pain I remembered, but also the pain I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it existed. The regret was still there, but no longer as an anchor. Now it was like a bridge. And in place of the guilt, something I'd never experienced before was born. Peace. A peace so intense, so alive, it seemed to have a life of its own. The love I felt wasn't just an emotion. It was a real, palpable presence that enveloped me like an eternal embrace. Jesus extended his hand again, not as a judge, but as a friend, as a brother. I took it without hesitation. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew with all my being that following him was the only possible choice. The darkness began to recede like mist before the morning sun. The heaviness, the pain, the suffocation. Everything disappeared as the light enveloped me. But it was no ordinary light. It was a living light, so pure and bright that my eyes could barely bear it at first. Yet it didn't hurt. On the contrary, it healed. As we walked, the surroundings changed. The air, once heavy and suffocating, was now light, sweet, and full of life. Breathing was like being born again. Each step brought back something of myself I thought had been lost forever. And then the light opened completely, and I saw the garden, a place human words could never describe with justice. The ground was covered in green grass so vibrant it seemed to sing. Flowers of colors I'd never seen before. Colors that perhaps don't even exist in our world, danced gently in the breeze. The air smelled of life, sweet, pure, almost innocent. The rivers that flowed through the garden gleamed like liquid silver, and the sound of the water was like a lullaby to the soul. It wasn't just beautiful, it was perfect. Jesus walked beside me, and in his eyes was the quiet joy of seeing a lost child return home. He looked at me tenderly and said, "This is the true paradise, Yusuf. Not the one promised with war and bloodshed, but this one, where peace, love, and the living presence of God reign. Here, the heart finds rest. Here there is no pain, no fear, no death." His words touched the deepest part of my being. All that idea of paradise I'd been taught, with its carnal promises and the glory of killing, now seemed like a pale, lifeless lie. True paradise lay before me, a place of healing, reconciliation, eternal hope, and above all, unconditional love. As we walked through that garden, I noticed other people passing by. They weren't strangers. They were scarred faces like mine, people who had also once been lost. And what I saw in their eyes was something I recognized immediately: regret transformed into gratitude. They were redeemed souls, people who had known pain, violence, darkness, but who, like me, had found the light. In that garden, I found people walking around me. They weren't strangers, they were just like me. Their faces were marked by pain, by bad choices, but now illuminated by something greater. They looked at me and smiled, not with judgment, but with understanding. It was as if they were silently saying, "We know, we've been there too, and now we're home." It was then that I understood. Heaven wasn't just a distant place. It was a state of being, a return to who we were always meant to be. A home that had always been there, waiting for us. Paradise was not a reward for the perfect. It was a gift for those who, though imperfect, chose to surrender to the truth and love of Christ. And there, in that garden where time seemed to stand still, I understood that my story wasn't over. On the contrary, it was just beginning. The people around me were complete, whole in the light of God's love. There was no condemnation, no shame. There were no accusatory looks or reminders of failure. There was only acceptance, an acceptance so complete, so absolute, that my heart could hardly believe it. In heaven, no one is rejected. No one is forgotten. Everyone has a place. Everyone is welcome. Jesus stopped beneath the shade of a majestic tree, its trunk sturdy and leaves shining like emeralds in the sun. From its branches hung golden fruits that looked like tiny suns, pulsing with life. He reached out, delicately plucked one, and handed it to me. "This is the fruit of life, Elijah," he said tenderly. My hands trembled as I picked up the fruit. It was warm, vibrant, as if it had a beating heart, and when I tasted the first piece, it was as if heaven itself had poured into me. The flavor was indescribable, sweeter than honey, purer than water. But it wasn't just the taste, it was what came with it. A deep, overwhelming joy, as if all the faults, all the wounds in my soul were being healed, filled, restored in that instant. What I had always sought, in hatred, in war, in sacrifice, was there, in the simplicity of a fruit and in the presence of the one who walked beside me. Jesus looked at me with compassion, and for the first time I truly understood. He was never there to condemn me. He didn't come to point out my wounds, but to heal them. "Elias," he said in a voice soft yet firm as the earth, "you have been deceived, but you are not beyond redemption." His words echoed within me like the sound of a distant bell reaching the heart of a lost traveler. "I died for you," continued, "for all sinners, for all who have lost their way. You are not beyond the reach of my grace." And in that moment, I cried, but not out of despair. I cried out of relief. The tears no longer came from pain, but from the hope that was beginning to blossom within me. The weight of my sins, the guilt that had suffocated me for years, began to evaporate like mist before the sun. Jesus held my hand tenderly and said, "If you turn to me, I will forgive you. Your sins are many, but my love is greater." These words pierced my soul like a sword, but not to wound, to free. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt something I had never experienced before: hope. Jesus looked into my eyes and repeated, soft as a breeze over calm waters, "I have shown you the way, Elijah, but the choice is yours. You can remain in the darkness, trapped in pain, hatred, and revenge, or you can walk in the light, on the path of peace, love, and life." In that instant, I knew with a clarity no ideology, no rallying cry had ever given me. There was no other way. I had seen hell, I had walked it, and now I was faced with a way out, a chance, a new life. I held his hand tightly, and as we walked together, the darkness that had enveloped me disappeared like smoke blown away by the wind. The light enveloped me completely. My body felt light, my soul free, my spirit reborn. The air was different now. There was no longer a heaviness in my chest, no shadows in my thoughts. Everything around me pulsed with life, real life. Jesus walked beside me with calm, serene steps, and his presence made everything blossom. The pain of the past seemed like a distant echo, the guilt a forgotten burden. There was the promise that no war, no ideology, no false prophet could fulfill. Real redemption, true love, eternal peace. And in that garden of grace, I knew, finally, I was home. There was no more heaviness, no more suffocating regret, only peace. A peace so deep, it felt like the silence after a lifelong storm. And then my eyes opened to a place I could never have imagined. Before me stretched a living garden, so vibrant, so full of life, that no earthly memory could compare. The flowers seemed made of light. Their colors weren't just colors, they were feelings. Each petal conveyed joy, beauty, and fulfillment. The air was sweet, laden with the fresh scent of creation, and the wind, as it passed through the leaves, sounded like music. Crystal clear streams meandered through the valley, shimmering like glass under a sun that didn't burn, but warmed the soul. Every detail of the place seemed to have been designed by the Creator himself, with infinite love and care. It was as if everything there, the air, the trees, the light, breathed the essence of God himself. I walked beside Jesus through that garden. For a few moments he said nothing. He was just there with me, as if he knew I needed to feel it all first without rushing. And even in silence, his presence spoke louder than 1,000 sermons. There with him there was no fear, there was no pain. With every breath I felt as if every stain on my soul were being washed away by the air of that new world. "This is eternal rest," he said finally, in a soft but firm voice. "But it's not just a place, it's a state of being. Here there is no war, no screaming, no tears. Only what should have always been there remains. Love, joy, and peace." I remained silent, trying to absorb the depth of those words, because I had believed in a paradise before, but it was a paradise of violence, built on lies. What I saw now, what I felt in every fiber of my being was true. This was true paradise, the place where broken hearts are mended, where the broken are mended, and where the lost are found again. As we walked, I noticed other people in that garden. Their faces weren't strangers. They were souls who also carried scars, difficult stories, pain similar to mine. But now they shone. Their eyes brimmed with gratitude. Their smiles were light, free. They had received the same forgiveness that had come to me. There was no distinction, no exclusion. Everyone was welcome. Everyone had a place. Jesus then stopped before a tree unlike any I had ever seen. Its branches were laden with fruit that shone as if carved by the light itself. "This is the fruit of life, Elijah," he said, handing me one of them. My hands trembled as I received the gift. It felt sacred. The fruit was warm, pulsating as if it had a life of its own. When I took the first bite, a wave of indescribable joy coursed through me. The tears flowed uncontrollably, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. They were tears of gratitude. It was like tasting, for the first time, what it means to be completely accepted, completely loved. Jesus looked at me tenderly, and in that look was all the truth. You no longer have to live in the shadow of what you did. You no longer have to carry the guilt. Elijah, you have been forgiven, and now there is a purpose for you. I froze. Purpose? After all I'd done? After the lies I'd believed, the evil I'd served? But he continued, "You have a mission. I have freed you for something greater. The world is still in darkness. Many are where you once were, lost, deceived. They need to hear. They need to know that there is redemption, that there is a path to true peace." His words sank deep into me. It wasn't just a calling, it was reconstruction. It was a new chance, a sacred responsibility. "Go, Elijah. Speak of my love. Show the way of forgiveness. You are no longer the man you once were. Now you are light where there was darkness." With my heart renewed and my soul restored, I understood. I had not just been saved from condemnation. I had been saved for something. Rescued from hell, to become a living witness to grace. And by that grace I would live. I was no longer a warrior of hate. Now I was called to be a messenger of love. I was no longer the terrorist, the murderer, the monster I had become by believing lies. That old man Omar had died, not by a bullet or an explosion, but by the truth that finally reached me. I was someone new, a new creation, redeemed. Accepting this wasn't easy. In fact, it seemed almost impossible to believe that someone with so much blood on their hands could be forgiven. But the love that touched me didn't come from men. It came from a Savior who looked not just at what I had been, but at what I could still be. Now I had a purpose. No longer to destroy, but to restore. No longer to spread fear, but to share the hope that had saved me. I knew what hell was, not as a metaphor, but as a reality. And precisely because of that, I knew I needed to be a voice for those still trapped in that same dark abyss. As my eyes roamed the vastness of peace that had been revealed to me, a certainty arose in my heart. This was the truth I had always sought. This was the home my soul had always silently longed for. Peace was not in the rifle I carried, nor in the blood I spilled. True peace was in the unconditional love of Christ. Pure, profound, eternal love. This was the true paradise. This was the path to salvation. And there, enveloped by the light and scent of eternity, I knew I would dedicate the rest of my life to shouting this truth to the world. No matter the cost, no matter the threats or rejection, I would carry this message because in the end, it was the only truth that truly mattered. When I opened my eyes, the light of the sky was gone. The calm had been replaced by a cold, sterile, almost hostile environment. I was lying in a hospital bed. The sound of the machines monitoring my heartbeat was constant, interrupted by distant voices in the hallway. The strong smell of antiseptic made me nauseous. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, a hallucination caused by the pain and blood loss. But something inside me said, no, that wasn't just a vision, that was real. More real than any battle you've ever faced. He's alive. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the bandages, my aching ribs, the constant throbbing in my broken bones. But my mind was clear, clearer than ever before. The questions that haunted me for so many years. Am I really doing God's will? Am I a righteous man? Now they had an answer, and that answer came not from books, nor from leaders, but from the love of Christ himself. In that cold bed, another truth hit me hard. I had changed, yes, but my past still existed. It hadn't disappeared with the light of the sky. The memories of the screams, the explosions, the looks pleading for mercy were still with me. I had been forgiven, but I still carried scars. Physical, spiritual, and psychological scars. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that staying in Syria was not an option. I was now a target, a traitor to my former brothers in arms. Those who had once called me a comrade would now hunt me as an enemy. Abandoning the jihad was unforgivable, and in their code, it was punishable by death. Returning to Raqqa would be suicide. I knew well the fate of deserters. I had seen with my own eyes what they did to those who dared to flee. They did not forgive. They did not forget. And surely they already knew of my desertion. Fear paralyzed me, but not for my own sake. It was fear of what might happen to others if I hesitated. Then I realized it wasn't exactly a choice. It was a necessity. I needed to escape. Escape from Syria, escape from the past, escape from the ghosts of war, and seek a new beginning in a place where the light that had touched me could flourish, not be stifled. Lebanon appeared to be the only possible way out. A nearby country, with still permeable borders and a bit more freedom. It wasn't a promise of comfort, but it was a chance. And for someone like me, a chance was everything. So under the cover of darkness, with silent steps and a heavy heart, I left it all behind. The weapons, the uniforms, the oaths. I left Syria, my land, my prison, my battlefield. I crossed the border like a ghost, disappearing into the darkness of the night. Behind me were the ruins of my former life and the faces of those who once called me brother. But ahead was hope. I arrived in Lebanon with only the clothes on my back and the crushing weight of guilt still clinging to my chest. I had fled Syria, escaping certain death, but I soon realized that my past was not far behind. It followed me like a shadow, whispering betrayal around every corner of that strange country. Deep down, I knew they would come for me. Those who had once fought alongside me now saw me as a traitor. To them, I wasn't just a deserter. I was a coward who had abandoned the cause. And that, in their code, carried only one sentence: death. The nights were silent, but fear screamed inside me, and I wondered, was I destined to die for this new faith? Would my testimony end before it even began? It was then that I clung to the memory of heaven, the deep peace I felt there, the unconditional love that filled my soul. There was no going back. The old Karim, the terrorist, the murderer, was in the past. I had been reborn. In Lebanon, I met Christians who welcomed me with patience and kindness. They taught me, step by step, the true meaning of Jesus' love and grace. And little by little, I began to understand how far I had lived from the truth I had always sought. Christianity wasn't a set of empty rituals, nor was it a war disguised as religion. It was peace. It was redemption. It was the call to bring that same salvation to others who, like me, were lost. Jesus' words now echoed within me with a different force, so far removed from the blind, radical faith I had previously followed. I understood that the peace promised in the struggle never existed. It had always been only violence and pain. Now I saw that true peace came from forgiveness. It was found in an open heart, in a small Coptic church, surrounded by simple people from different backgrounds, but united by the same love. There I found a place to breathe. The priest greeted me with a look full of understanding, a look that, for the first time in many years, made me feel accepted. I told him my story. I told him about the battles, the deaths, the destruction I had caused in the name of a lie. I told him about the hell I had seen, about my encounter with Jesus, and about the gift of a second chance. He smiled tenderly and said, in a soft voice that seemed to pierce my soul, "Karim, no matter what you did, Jesus offers forgiveness." Those words fell upon me like a balm. It was as if some of the weight I'd been carrying had been lifted in that instant. I knew what I needed to do: renounce my past and abandon once and for all the ideology that had nearly destroyed me. That same day, I was baptized. The cold water that ran over me washed away not only my body but also all the darkness that had consumed me for so long. I felt the old Karim sink, the terrorist, the man of violence, and someone new emerge, someone who had known God's grace and was ready to follow a different path. The future was uncertain. I didn't know what awaited me. But one thing was engraved on my heart: I could no longer remain silent. With renewed faith, I began telling my story to anyone who would listen, especially those who, like me, had once been deceived. Ex-combatants, extremists, souls trapped in lies. I wanted to show that there was another way, a way of love, of forgiveness, of true salvation found only in Christ. I began to share with everyone what had been revealed to me. I spoke of the terrible hell that awaits those who choose violence as their path. But I also spoke of the light, peace, and love that heaven offers. It wasn't an easy path. The danger was constant. The same men who had once called me a hero now saw me as a traitor. The threats began soon after my baptism. I knew they would never accept my decision to abandon the cause. To them, my desertion was unforgivable. And yet, amidst so many threats, I felt the love of Christ pulsing within me, giving me courage and strength to carry on. My purpose now was no longer to spread fear or destruction, but to lead those still trapped in that cycle of darkness out of it, to show them that there was another way, the way of peace that Jesus offers to all with an open heart. I continued speaking whenever I could, in churches hidden among refugee camps, in secret, almost whispered meetings, far from the eyes that wanted to silence me. My words reached others who, like me, had been deceived. Men and women scarred by wars and false doctrines. Many listened in silence, but I sensed that something in their hearts was beginning to change. Some, touched by the love I conveyed, surrendered themselves to Christ, finally finding the peace they so desperately sought. The danger never disappeared. I knew my life was at risk every day, but the love that reached me was greater than the fear that tried to paralyze me. Jesus gave me a new life, and I was willing to spend it all proclaiming his message of forgiveness and redemption. I began wearing a small cross around my neck. It wasn't jewelry, but a symbol. For me, that cross didn't represent death or suffering, but the mark of the new life Christ had given me. I was prepared to pay any price for this mission. A heart that had once been hardened by hatred now beat with renewed strength. I had been transformed into an instrument of something much greater than myself. My first steps in this calling were in the refugee camps of Lebanon. There, amidst lives destroyed by war, I began to tell my story. I spoke of the hell I had known, of the torment that accompanies those who choose violence. But I didn't dwell solely on pain. I spoke of redemption, of Jesus' infinite love, of the mercy that reached me, and of the true peace I found in him. My story wasn't just words. I was living proof that Christ transforms. The man who once took lives was now giving life, sharing hope with those who were lost. Over time, I began leading small Bible studies at campgrounds, quiet gatherings in hidden corners where people hungry for truth could hear about healing love. In the eyes of those listening, I saw the same weariness and doubt that had once consumed me. But as I spoke, something different emerged. A spark of hope. A hope that had been crushed by pain and violence, but that suddenly began to be reborn. Many came from devastated lands, from endless battles, from ideologies that trapped them as they trapped me. Some had fought on the same fields I had. Others had been victims of the same system I once defended. But there, in that simple refuge, when they heard about Christ's love, forgiveness, and new life, their hearts opened. A timid light began to dawn where before there had been only darkness. I felt, with profound clarity, that the truth was taking root in the hearts of these people. The small cross around my neck was no longer a mere object. It was a silent testimony to the transformation God's grace had wrought in me. Little by little, I began to understand the true meaning of the gospel, a message of love, hope, and rebirth. But even amid the joy of seeing others surrender their lives to Christ, the shadow of danger never left me. The threats kept coming, relentless. Those I once called brothers hadn't forgotten. To them, I was just a traitor, and they would do anything to silence me. They sent clear messages, direct messages that I no longer had the right to live. I knew they were looking for me. Many nights I lay awake, hearing gunshots and explosions in the distance, wondering if this would be the last night of my life. But surprisingly, even in the most tense moments, when fear tried to overwhelm me, something new inhabited my heart, a deep, unshakable peace. I was no longer a slave to terror as before. I had traversed the hell of my soul, and now Christ's love filled all the voids that had previously been occupied by pain and guilt. I knew that whatever happened, I was not alone. Jesus had shown me the way, and as long as I breathed, I would continue to be a living testimony of that grace. In the underground churches, I found a new family, men and women who had also fought internal and external wars, who had fought battles similar to mine, and who, like me, had been transformed by the healing power of Christ. These secret meetings, hidden from the authorities and extremists who wanted to destroy us, became my refuge. There, amidst the silence and constant surveillance, we drew strength from each other. We prayed together, shared our pains, and also our victories. It was faith that united us. At one of these meetings, before a group of veterans, I realized an even greater truth. My mission wasn't just about my own salvation. It was about bringing light to those still trapped in the same shadows I once was. My voice choked with emotion, I said to them, I was lost. I was deceived. But I found the truth. I looked into each of their eyes, trying to convey the weight and sincerity of my experience. Jesus showed me the way, and I'm here to tell you that you can be free too. As I spoke, I saw tears well up in some of their eyes. I saw the struggle etched on their faces. It was the same internal conflict I myself faced when I began to question everything I believed in. But I also saw something else. I saw a spark. The flame of hope was beginning to shine in their weary eyes. At that moment, I was sure my mission was just beginning. Despite the dangers, despite the threats, I would press on. I continued to speak out whenever I could. In hidden churches, in refugee camps, in secret meetings with veterans and people still trapped in hatred, my story became like a burning flame, a beacon for those still deceived by darkness. Some found peace in Christ. Others still fought their own internal battles. But I knew I was doing my part, sharing the same love that saved me. Adjusting to my new life wasn't easy. Memories of the war, the violence, and the brutalities I'd seen and committed haunted me like shadows that refused to go away. Many nights I woke with a start, covered in sweat, tormented by the screams, the innocent faces, the scenes of destruction I'd helped cause. These memories cut like sharp knives into my soul. But over time, as I surrendered more and more to Christ's love, these images began to lose their power over me. Darkness gave way to light, and the pain that once suffocated me was replaced by an unexpected calm. Something shifted inside me. I began to feel an almost palpable calling, an invitation to live for something greater than myself, to transform pain into purpose. I understood then that my life would no longer be merely an escape from my dark past. My mission was different, to share the redemption and peace I had found, to tell the world about the love that had rescued me. This love couldn't just stay with me. It needed to be spread. That's how I heard about it, Christian Missionary Society, a group that took the gospel to the darkest places, where people still lived trapped by fear, hatred, and pain. They didn't just preach, they lived the love of Christ, restoring lives and bringing hope to broken hearts. At that moment, I knew for sure this was the path I needed to follow. It wasn't just about talking about Jesus, but about showing, with every gesture, that no matter how low someone has fallen, there is always redemption. And I knew this would be my life's mission. I knew what it was like to walk in darkness. I knew what it was like to be deceived by lies, consumed by hatred and violence. I had walked this path of extremism. I had known terror firsthand, but I had also experienced God's transforming grace. And that was why I decided I wanted others to find this same truth. A Christian Missionary Society welcomed me with open arms. They listened to my story, recognized the transformation I had experienced, and the fire that burned in my heart. There, I received training in evangelism, learning how to connect with people from different backgrounds. Soon, I began traveling with them. Whether in refugee camps, hidden villages, or noisy cities, I spoke to those who were still trapped in the same darkness that once trapped me. People consumed by fear, hatred, and lies. I remember one day in particular, in a crowded market on a small Pacific island. The air was filled with the scent of spices, the chatter of voices in different languages, and the din of negotiations. Amidst the chaos, an unexpected peace filled my heart. It was then that I saw a man sitting alone, leaning against a tent. His gaze was empty, lost, like someone who had already carried too much pain in his life. And in that tired face, I recognized myself. Samir that I had been, a man without direction, suffocated by the weight of his mistakes. With a heavy but determined heart, I approached. "Excuse me, friend," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I want to share something with you. I know exactly what it's like to be lost, trapped in the darkness. But I also know there is hope. There is a path to peace. His name is Jesus, and he loves you." The man looked at me suspiciously. There was skepticism in his eyes, but also a faint spark of curiosity. I could see the weight he carried. It was the same weight I once carried. Guilt, fear, pain. "You don't understand," he replied, his voice thick with suffering. "I have done terrible things. I do not deserve forgiveness." I smiled compassionately and replied sincerely, "I understand more than you know. I was once a man like that, consumed by hatred and violence. But I found Jesus, and he gave me a second chance. He can give it to you too." His silence was profound. I saw his hardened eyes slowly soften. For the first time, I perceived a different glow, a spark of hope. I continued speaking about the love of Christ, the sacrifice of the cross, and how forgiveness depends not on our actions, but on the greatness of God's love. I shared my testimony, the hell I'd known, the encounter that changed everything, the new life I'd received. When we finished, tears streamed down his face. He wanted to believe, but felt the past weighed too heavily. So I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Jesus isn't here to condemn you. He's here to set you free. All you need to do is trust him." We prayed together, and in that moment, I felt God's presence in a way I had never felt before. A true, palpable peace washed over us. There I understood clearly. My calling was not just to be saved. My calling was to be a light in the lives of those who were still trapped in darkness. Since then, I've traveled with the Christian mission to many places: busy streets, forgotten villages, refugee camps. Everywhere I went, I encountered the same looks marked by fear, pain, and loss. But also, I saw something else: the real possibility of redemption. The years passed, and my journey continued. I shared the love of Christ with men and women of all ages and backgrounds. Some were veterans, like me. Others were victims of violence. Many had never known true peace. But the message was always the same: Jesus loves you. You're never too lost. He's calling you home. And that was when the fear of death stopped haunting me. I knew I was living for something greater than myself. I was living for Christ. And that was more than enough. I was born in a land scarred by war, grew up under the shadow of extremism, and experienced the brunt of violence firsthand. But today I am a man of peace. I'm no longer defined by the past that imprisoned me. I've been given a second chance, something I never would have earned on my own. And it is this same opportunity that I now share with all who listen to me, my brothers, my sisters. Listen well. Jesus loves you. This love is greater than any guilt, stronger than any wound, deeper than any darkness that tries to suffocate your soul. I am living proof of that. If he reached someone like me who once walked in darkness, he can reach you too. Today, my mission is simple and at the same time immense: to be a witness to this love, to share what I experienced, to show that true peace is not born of war, but of forgiveness. It does not come from hatred, but from grace. It is not won with weapons, but received in the embrace of Christ. And if my life serves to help just one person find the same light that freed me, then it will have been worth it.